Spags, we are back. Today's a special day. This is the day that $1 million teams are drafted, and you and I are going to compete for $3 million in Best Ball Mania IV.
Yeah, pretty crazy. I think we're the only stream going today, given what a historic day it's been, for all the teams out there that have won millions of dollars in the past. But today, Pete and I will be the ones joining in. And Pete, it's kind of like that running back debate. Do you want the running back that did it before, or do you want the running back that's going to do it in the future? And I think we're the running back doing it in the future.
Holy cow. I don't spend that much time on Twitter these days. And I popped in yesterday and it was like, oh my God, the running back discourse. Like that was the only thing going on yesterday on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to put you on the spot and ask you, like, what's your solution? Because I think Sam Sherman tweeted a take about it being giving uncapped contracts to those guys. I've heard in the past, maybe contracts that don't count against the cap, maybe some combination of the both. But how do you solve the plight of big running back?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because I do think just the way the position now works, they are in a rough spot. And so then you ask, do you actually change the way the contracts work positionally to better reflect that the lifespan for running backs is really short? I think Adam Levitan had a suggestion of like you change the contract duration and make it shorter. So they're only 2 years, and that way they're up for paydays earlier than they'd otherwise be. Because, yeah, it's just like right now it makes sense for these teams to run their players into the ground. Even a guy like Tony Pollard, who's going to play this year on the franchise tag, it's like they're just going to give him a ton of touches and then probably move on to another running back. So, I don't know if there's a perfectly elegant solution, but it probably does involve the Players Association negotiating a better contract setup for them.
Yeah, I think there's got to be something that changes overall or incentivizes teams. Like obviously the NFL did the Rooney Rule stuff to try to get more diversity in terms of the hiring. So maybe you do that to prop up running backs a little bit. Or I guess you could just say like, the free market's deciding what it's supposed to based upon team construction and all of that. And I think this has been really the reason, Pete, you're selling an I Heart wide receiver shirt, not an I Heart running back shirt, because that's just where the trend's been going for years now.
Exactly. And we are underway here in my 90th Best Ball Mania draft. I am drafting from an all too familiar location at 111. Spags, you are at 19 and select Stefon Diggs. How are you feeling?
Feel good about that. I actually, on my Friday stream, Pete, 2 drafts in a row, 2 101s in a row for me. So I've been actually eating too well in terms of getting Justin Jefferson and some weird picks. So where you're picking, a great spot to pick for some people.
I honestly don't mind. It's more just like the monotony of picking from the back of the board. Like I want to mix it up a little bit, but I actually don't mind this spot. So, I was going to get either AJ Brown or Bijan there. I was happy with either of them. And then I also know that regardless of what fake Sharp does here, I'm going to get one of these 3 wide receivers I like, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, or Devontae Adams. You can see I have pretty smoothed out exposures on all these guys. So I don't hate it from like a player selection and, what it sets you up to do at various points in the draft, but I just need some variety in my life right now, Spags.
Yeah, I felt that way with the 101s. Like I take Jefferson, then it's like, oh, am I going to reach for Watson here? I don't know. But you get Garrett Wilson, which I feel like a youthful room you're taking right away. And I'm going to take a share, Pete, of a guy that I think is on the way up that I've not taken enough of. I know, especially because I do believe he could be the RB1. Nick Chubb for me. I never take an early running back, but today's the day.
Yeah, I keep referencing, Eagles, the high volume underdog grinder who loves Nick Chubb. I believe his bio says Nick Chubb 101. And he told me the other night I did a Best Ball After Dark with him, and he's like, I think Nick Chubb is going to flip Bijan and be a regular first round pick as we enter kind of like the home stretch of drafting. And I was like, I could see first round pick. I do not see him jumping Bijan. But then lo and behold, I've been seeing screenshots of Nick Chubb in the not early first, but like mid to late first, and even ahead of Bijan. And so I'm like, holy cow, Eagles, the Nick Chubb oracle. I agree with you. I think in most drafts, he's moving up, inching up. And I think too, if we do finally start to see some pushback against the Piss Boys, against all the I love wide receivers and being like, what are we doing here? Like, I'm not taking CeeDee Lamb ahead of Nick Chubb. I think that kind of mentality could eventually seep into the ADP in a way that makes him a staple of the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much like you. Obviously, I study at the altar of the ship chasing guys and what we've talked about for wide receivers for so many years. And like, I certainly tend to think that, even a late first round wide receiver is going to be a little more appealing to my draft strategy than a late running or than a running back would be in that range. That said, with Nick Chubb, I just think there are too many things aligning for him where you're losing Kareem Hunt. Obviously, people focus on the pass game work that's going to come his way because of that, but it is also an increase in rushing touches as well, especially if Jerome Ford is more of just a kickoff specialist guy rather than somebody who's actually meaningfully involved in the offense. And then two, another full year of Deshaun Watson, who I do think will be better than he was last year, where to me, Jacoby Brissett was clearly the better QB. This year, I think Cleveland a full offseason, a full more distance from Watson and whatever he's been dealing with, that poor guy. But overall, I think it's just Cleveland to me is going the right way, Pete. And I think taking a top running back who is also great in advanced analytics, like a lot of times these guys get volume and it just comes back down and they're basically like an average back because that's sort of what happens when you give a guy 20 touches. Chubb's been great with everything. So I think like you kind of put that all together and it seems to me like he should probably be going ahead of Bijan, even though I think Bijan's a great pick too.
The thing is I'm still pretty low, I think, on Nick Chubb relative to the running backs going after him. When I really do think of that, and I'll be excited to see Pat's legendary upside criteria for this year, but I don't think Nick Chubb is going to make the cut. When you see just how little they've used him in the passing game and the fact that he is, likely to come off the field in more situations. And people often push back. And one thing I think to mention, and maybe did we have this conversation about Nick Chubb? It's all deja vu. But the thing about like people will be like, it's half point PPR, the receptions don't matter as much. It's not the reception points. It's the fact that these guys come off the field and are not playing in all game flow situations, because even coming off the field means you are ineligible to touch the ball, no matter how that would happen, a broken play, a check down, whatever. Like being on the field all the time is super valuable. And that's, I think, the knock against Chubb and why I prefer guys like Pollard and Stevenson and Breece Hall, guys who I think can be on the field for every play. And so the way I ultimately think about Nick Chubb is like Mike Evans last year, where it's like Mike Evans was going in the second round. I thought he was overpriced, but does he have the ability to drop 40 points in week 17 and win you the tournament? Obviously. And I think Nick Chubb has that as well. So you got to balance that of like, he could be the guy you need, but I also think he could underwhelm from a season long, like advancement rate kind of perspective.
I think that there's the downside risk, but also some upside there. I get Josh Allen at 33, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. And Pete gets his pick. So let's see what you do.
Yeah, I actually, for as much Keenan and Judy I actually don't have a ton of these guys together because in my rooms, and I'm saying this as if Fake Sharp's not going to take Judy here, but I kind of been trying to get those pairings a little bit just because I'm never able to get them in a lot of my best ball breakfast drafts. I did take a second share of Calvin Ridley yesterday when he fell to me at the turn, and there Judy goes, so that dream is dead. I think what I will do here, man, I do not like this spot here. Am I going to keep taking Calvin Ridley?
I have
no
12% Ridley and only 5% Kirk, which surprised me, but I think I do like Ridley more. Fancy Zay Jones is what we're calling him in the streets.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do is build out my bet on Atlanta. Where I'm picking on this board right here, I'm probably not going to reach for Kyle Pitts at 59 or 62, with Kyle Pitts often sliding to this side of the board. And I probably wouldn't onslaught the Falcons with Bijan, London, and Pitts. So I'm going to grab Drake London there instead.
And I'm going to take Calvin Ridley 8 spots after ADP, which I feel pretty good about. I don't view Calvin Ridley as a falling sword guy. I like him okay at 32. I'd rather not reach for him, kind of like the DK Metcalf thing I've talked about when I'm taking 0 RB teams. But Ridley at 40, I think is an appropriate price. I don't mind that.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing too, I'm very lightweight Ridley. I've taken 2 shares through 90 drafts. And, when I was doing my portfolio review, I wanted to get a little bit higher on Ridley, but mainly I wanted to balance it out by taking more Christian Kirk because I'm light on both of those guys. The conversation I had with the guys on my portfolio review show was, it's not that I think, Calvin Ridley to me is kind of like Barkley or Chubb in that they are the first players of what I think is a long tier. And I even prefer some of the players going after them. So it's not saying he doesn't belong in this tier, but I just don't think they're, again, I keep always using the example from like after Deebo Samuel goes, these wide receivers all the way to like Treylon Burks and George Pickens, they're all part of this same tier for me. And so I just don't like Calvin Ridley being at the top of that tier, but I think picking your spots, I took a share yesterday when he slid to me around this spot as well. I think I did a DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley start when those guys fell a lot. So I'll get up to probably 3 to 4% Calvin Ridley, but I'm going to remain underweight.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's some flaws in Ridley. If you look at the data, obviously kind of the Falcon stuff got painted over by the fact that he did get suspended for the gambling, and it also was going through his mental health issues as part of that process, but he wasn't good leading up to that either. And I think there could be some concern there. That said, I've kind of talked about the being on the downside of Trevor Lawrence and wanted to take him when he falls. I do think that he's still a guy that ran a functional offense that had big spike weeks for guys like Zay Jones, for Evan Ingram, who just signed his 3-year contract extension too. Like Ridley can absolutely be that downfield threat who I think has spike weeks, even if he's not a world beater. Like I think Watson could be game to game, or even a Drake London could be game to game. So I'm a little more pro Ridley, I guess, but in this range, like I do kind of prefer McLaurin. I do think I prefer Watson. Maybe head to head with London for me with Ridley, but I think Ridley's okay. He's just one of the guys. You're right. He's one of the guys in this range.
And my thing with Ridley is I am not discounting the upside, because if we get the Calvin Ridley that we got before he left football, he's like a 1-2 turn pick. He's going where CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson and these guys go. Like that's definitely, if we get that, I just think there's way more downside risk. Like when you talk about small hit, big miss, that to me is Calvin Ridley, where it's like, okay, he's going in the late third. Do I think he could jump around and be like a early second pick or whatever? Sure. I could see that happening, but I also think he could just be worth like an 11th or 12th round pick and have kind of a midly season and be splitting, target share with Ingram and Kirk and Zay Jones. Like, I do think that's also within the range of outcomes. And so when I look at some of these guys where I'm like, sure, maybe Chris Godwin can't be a first round pick next year like Calvin Ridley can, but I also don't really see Chris Godwin just completely bottoming out. Maybe people disagree because of the quarterback, yada, yada. But I'm mainly just trying to point out that having Calvin Ridley not played football for as long as he has, there is legit downside risk.
Speaking of legit downside risk, I am taking the lowly ranked receiver Deontay Johnson.
Whoa, what do you stand for anymore?
It's just the ADP is aligned, and I guess I'll take him at a slightly lower than ADP pick rather than reach for JSN, though I'm low on JSN, and I don't like Deontay, and I think I'm at like 4% Deontay, so I don't know. I try to play by the ADPs, and sometimes that gives you a Deontay Johnson when you really don't want it ever.
It's just funny because Deontay's gotten much more expensive over the past couple weeks. And so now you're back in your bags when he got more expensive than when he was cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, I had enough of him in the 80, 70 range when that was happening. So that's where I got my initial take, was just like him as part of this bet on Pittsburgh. And then as he started to come up and pass Pickens, I was like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. That said, like if he's got an ADP, 7 spots, 8 spots ahead of JSN, I think I should probably take Deontay there, even if I disagree with him as a player.
I think I might dance around. I was going to take Dobbins and maybe do like an interesting 3 running back build here. This is where I'm going to dance around the ADP a bit more. I'm going to take Jordan Addison here. I'll leave you Michael Pittman. So this kind of goes back to where I've started to like be a little bit. Normally I'm just selecting Tyler Lockett, which is how I end up with 17% Tyler Lockett, even though I'm just like, Tyler Lockett's fine. And this was one of the valuable exercises of reviewing my portfolio, is being like, I'm not just going to always mindlessly click the same guy in those spots. And because I think this is such a flat tier, I am going to mix up my exposure a little bit more.
I guess I'm not going to mix up my exposure and take Michael Pittman. Aaron Jones is falling, but probably not enough to justify it. Add in Pete, my $1,000 man, Michael Pittman, another share. I got to stop at a certain point. I have to stop, but I don't know when that's going to be.
Well, you're in the same. I mean, you have way more Pittman than I do Lockett, but it's like the same thing. Like, I know you like Pittman, but do you like Pittman as much as your bankroll is on him relative to guys like Dotson, Burks, Gabe Davis, Pickens, Johnson, which I'm sure you have different takes on those guys individually, but as a cohort, do you like him that much more than them?
I like Pitt. So I would have taken Lockett if he fell there. That was where I was thinking, okay, I got Deontay Johnson. Don't normally take him. I do a lot of Seattle, Pittsburgh, but it's not usually through Deontay Johnson and Tyler Lockett. So that would have made this decision easier for me. I do think Pittman is the best player in this immediate range in terms of the upside, in terms of the ceiling, the ability to earn targets, all that, and as well as just having a bad situation that he still played pretty well in the last few years. So I like Pittman, but yeah, like I don't want to have 33% anybody, I think, besides AR. So that's sort
Yeah.
of where I am with it. Is like I'd like to get him to 25 over the next, 2 months.
Where are you at on Evans? Because he would have been the other guy. I think that would have been a logical choice over Pittman.
I am low on Evans just because I think it is not the likeliest thing the Bucks are playing full go by week 17. I'm actually at I'm at 2% Evans, a little bit above
Wow.
2%.
So is that an intentional fade or
Yes.
just how it's shaking out? Okay.
It is an intentional fade, but one that I'll start to walk back. And that's normally been my process, especially last summer where it was really going heavy on every possible tournament. Was that okay? I'll get my guys early on, then start to ramp them back down because I find it easier to ramp guys back down and really start to go out of your way to get them. So like I'm going to start taking Evans probably in value rooms. Same thing with like the Arizona receivers, who I don't like very much, but they're cheap enough to get there. I just think that the Cardinals and the Bucks, to me, are the two teams that I don't see how they're still going full go by week 17. Just how the Super Bowl odds are, how they're structured. I think it's going to be bad for Evans and Godwin by the time that we need them to play.
I like Evans, but one thing I will concede is that I think you'll be able to get your Evans shares at these prices whenever you want.
Right.
I don't think he's a guy that's going to, move up around because of training camp buzz. I mean, we're just not going to get the thing that, Mike Evans and Kyle Trask have this incredible connection and the market's going to be like, all right, I need to start taking him around earlier. So, whereas I do think guys like Quentin Johnston is going to move up, you're going to see some of these other guys once. I do think regardless whether depending on how training camp shakes out for the Ravens, you're going to see one of Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers move up too, because they're both kind of hovering with slight uncertainty. I can see the market. My thesis has been Rashad Bateman is going to have a slow start to camp coming back from the foot, and the market's going to start jamming Zay Flowers as Rashad Bateman comes off the board here at pick 79. So these guys I think are all going to be risers here. And getting ahead of that, I think makes some sense.
I'm just taking Dallas Goedert here, who I think is, really a tier break at tight end. I don't think he should be going after Waller personally, but I like my build so far getting Goddard there.
I ran to the podium with Quentin Johnston there. I was surprised he made it through that gauntlet. Not normally a thing that happens in my drafts where he slides past ADP. I obviously don't have Justin Herbert, but I still like having this this Charger stack without him. And
Yeah, I
now,
agree.
nothing I want to do at quarterback right here. Nothing I want to do at tight end. I really don't feel like these running backs complement like my Bijan and Kenneth Walker start. So I am just going to take Zay Flowers here. We have a very heavy rookie theme to these last three picks: Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers.
But all guys that I think fit your thesis of, guys that can be on the way up. So I certainly wouldn't mind that for you. Got Rachaad White falling here. Do feel like we're getting pretty close to a receiver tier break. It's going to be more pronounced as we go on here. Yeah, man, I wish I had not taken Goddard now. I am going to take Rachaad White here. I do think Rachaad White, for what I talked about with Tampa Bay, I think there's no way that Rachaad White's not involved down the home stretch. Just a guy that I imagine will be a part of their plans for this year, and then we'll see what they do in the future at the position. But White, to me, I think is safe from the week 17 stuff I'm worried about with Evans and Godwin. But Pete does feel like a little bit of a run on receiver here. So I think you did well getting ahead of the curve a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I always, I judge a room how wide receiver heavy it is based on the quality of wide receiver around pick 83 or 84. So getting Quentin Johnston, who normally is not coming back to 83 or 84, felt good to me. Same with like Elijah Moore and Zay Flowers being here. So I think this is what I would call a more normal room, but the run does inevitably always happen. I think for you, Rachaad White made sense as a second running back there as you were prioritizing other positions. We do see some weird stuff happening here. Anthony Richardson, who's been sliding in drafts, he goes at 89 here. The drafter with Jonathan Taylor. I personally love the Jonathan Taylor Richardson pairing. I think it's like my preferred way to play Richardson is actually with Taylor. But Richardson is falling to 104 almost all the time in these drafts. So I don't know. I don't like taking him at 89. I would prefer to wait and see if he comes back to 104.
Yeah, I think he's gonna come. I mean, look, this is in my thesis this entire time period is that he was going to be down until training camp. Then we're going to find out, basically if he's going to be a starter. I think he's still probably splitting the QB1 snaps. Gardner Minshew is going to be the way this kicks off. But then once we get to preseason, that's where you could see him potentially get steamed up if he does have an outlier preseason game. And Pete, rookies are reporting today, so this is actually the time where we're going to start to get news in that could affect these guys' positions a little bit. And I still think there's an AR steam left, but I agree that you should be taking him in the 100 range now. Like I wouldn't reach for him now personally.
Yeah, I think you gotta be patient with him. I did want to pull this up from Sam. So Sam says, curious what you guys think the percentage of 600,000 plus entries will be from quote unquote casual drafters. The rooms have already started to get much easier, in my opinion, as we get closer to the season. So yeah, that I agree with. That's gonna be a thing. We're gonna get more drafters coming in. And I think in general, I shared this graphic the other day on Twitter where it's at ZWK football. And he said week 17 game stacks are still pretty rare on underdog. And he looked at pairings and they're all around 10% for week 17 stacks. And it's like in our bubble, it seems like 40% of the field, 50% of the field is week 17 stacking. It's still roughly 10%. And so I think if you use that as a proxy, like I do think maybe like 10% of the field is pulling all of these possible micro edge levers. Week 17 correlation, good roster construction, ADP value, avoiding dead roster spots, all these levers we like to pull. I would just ballpark it around 10% based on these kind of week 17 things. And maybe that number comes down because this is, through however many drafts, maybe this comes down and it's 7-8% of drafts are heavily utilizing these correlations. So I do think that there is still a big edge relative to what the majority of the field is doing.
Yeah, I agree. That's the thing that I think definitely has stood out with Chad Maschke's data is another one out there. He's been collecting all the BBM entries and I think has like 2% of the field so far. And it just seems like stacks underrepresented. And that's why too, when I see the people on Twitter who are like, oh, we're at the point now where like, you might not even want to stack. You just want to take the best players. And it's like, that's not the way to do this. I think cutting down your parlay is always the goal for any sort of DFS format, any fantasy format kind of thing. And that's something where if you're doing that every single time out, you're just in a better spot across your portfolio. So I don't know. I just hate that take, and it does pop up way too often these days.
Yeah. I'm looking here at this board, seeing what I want to do. Fake Sharp keeps sniping me today. I wanted to take Penny. I will take, man, do I like Brian Robinson for this build? I don't love it, but I don't hate it. We'll grab Brian Robinson here. There was nothing, I guess this could have been a spot to take Daniel Jones and build out like a backdoor stack thing. I could have taken Kirk Cousins ahead of ADP to pair with Addison, but I don't know. Maybe I should have because I took Addison ahead of ADP and I've already kind of made like a reach there. But I don't know. I just didn't like the quarterbacks in that range.
And I'm taking Alan Lazard here to get a little bit of correlation with Nick Chubb going. Normally not taking Lazard, but I do want a fifth receiver at this point through 10 rounds. So Lazard is the guy who gets the call up, even though I have no interest at all in Alan Lazard in general. Pete, this might be one of my first shares of Alan Lazard.
I have very little Lazard too. I think I took him once or twice when he slipped well past ADP. But he's fine. He's a guy. I mean, where were you at? Yeah, you were catching up at wide receiver because you took a couple running backs, you took Goddard. So you were at 4 through. Yeah, and that like when you are only 4 wide receivers through 10, like it does feel like the spots where you either bite the bullet on kind of a boring veteran like a Juju, like a Lazard, like a Jacoby Myers, or you basically say like, I'm going to reach for one of the sexier guys like Mingo or Rashi Rice or whoever, like, and in this draft, I mean, Sky Moore went 98. Nico Collins went 101. So some of the more fun options, if you're catching up at wide receiver, are already gone. And I think this is a canary in the coal mine, right? Nico going here, Sky Moore going, like these guys, drafters need wide receivers in round 9 if they've made detours, and no one wants to select these guys that all just came off the board in the 10th: Lazard, Tyler Boyd, Juju, Odell, Jacoby. And so we're going to see the sexier names pop up here into the top 100 picks. And Nico is a guy I kind of want to get a few more shares of before this really solidifies, because I do think he's going to be a top 100 pick down the stretch.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think he goes in like Sutton range? Because that feels like where the market's starting to push him. I think there's better options late, but I get the logic on why he is a big bodied outside receiver, and there's not a lot of them in that room.
I think the market in general is always going to love who's a cheap wide receiver one. Where's this cheap volume I can get? And I think people will, sell. And I like Nico Collins, but I agree with you. I mean, it starts to get pretty pricey in this range. I think you are, similar to how I'm like heavy on Pickett and the Steelers offense. Like a bet on Nico Collins is like a pretty big bet on Stroud to be better than advertised, I think, in year one. And, they also have, as much as Nico Collins is the best option they have, like they draft Tank Dell, they bring in Robert Woods, who could still lead that team in targets. Dalton Schultz could also, lead that team in targets. And so I do think it's a more fragile projection. Obviously, if Nico hits and earns the highest target share in that offense, you're going to be very happy with him. But I don't know if that's a lock that he's going to earn that target share.
Yeah, I'm with you. I drafted the Texans on my Spag stacks on Friday, where I'm spinning a randomizer wheel and do that. Of course, doing that every week here to make sure that I get all the teams in on their home stretch. I think Dalton Schultz is the safest Texans pass catcher. So I thought it was interesting that you've kind of flagged that, because to me, just Schultz is like, he's not great. Wasn't great on Dallas, but somebody's got to catch passes in Houston.
Yeah.
Do you have Aaron Rodgers here potentially to take? But I feel like I can punt that. I think I am going to reach a little for Dalton Kincaid here just to make sure I get him. I think he might fall in this room anyway, but I think Rodgers is going to fall too, so I don't really care.
He's not, Spags, because I
Oh,
need
you
a
think,
quarterback,
damn
and
it.
I have Garrett Wilson, so that was
Oh,
never
you
gonna
do have
happen.
Garrett. Well, good. I'm
Yeah.
glad I didn't snipe you, Pete. That was really the main thing, was to not
Yeah.
the most holy of days.
Yeah. I was waiting to see you talk that out. You're like, oh, Garrett Wilson or Aaron Rodgers will come back. I'm like, no, he
I
won't.
mean, do
And,
I want the Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard correlation and have to fight for Tyler Conklin in this room? I don't think I need that stress.
no, you don't. Um, let's see here. The question is, what do I want to do here? I think what I'll do, I love Greg Dulcich. I've been drafting a ton of him. Russell Wilson will not make it back to me, but because I have this kind of mini stack here with this Chargers, having Keenan and Quentin Johnston and fulfilling kind of a positional need here as I have 0 tight ends, I like getting Greg Dulcich in this build.
Yeah, Greg Dulcich definitely been some nice offseason reports for him. This Joker role that's so much hype in the Sean Payton offense. We'll see if he actually gets anything useful there. I get Jaylen Warren on the way back, who is one of my big stands here and will continue to be. And I might be live for a certain Pittsburgh quarterback that people love taking on stacks. So I'll get sniped on Kenny Pickett later.
Yeah, you have to have pretty heavy Jaylen Warren bags. I feel like every time we draft, you have Jaylen Warren on your team.
I am at 28.5% in Jaylen Warren, and I don't know that'll stop. I do, again, have wanted to set myself a hard cap of 25% for everybody, but I think Warren still should come up a little bit throughout the training camp process, just from people realizing that, oh yeah, like he is live to take 10 to 15 touches away if things go a certain direction. So I like Warren a lot still, Pete. I know you're in the same boat as me.
I do like Warren. I'll be really curious to see which direction like the training camp chatter is, as far as, is it like, holy cow, Jaylen Warren looks good and him and Najee are like co 1A, 1B, or is it, Najee was injured, this offensive line looks good, Najee's doing everything? Because I do think one of the things I'm excited about with training camp is the shuffling of ADPs and a lot of these situations that are relatively fragile, because a lot of it is based on sentiment right now, and I think sentiment can really push things, right? Like if Zach Charbonnet is the talk of Seahawks camp, you'll see Walker come down another round and Charbonnet push up a couple rounds. Same thing with this Najee type stuff. Like if all the reports are glowing on Najee, I wouldn't be surprised to see him become a staple of the third round, being like, you guys are all messing around with Jaylen Warren. What are you doing? Of course, Najee's the guy. And then maybe Jaylen Warren gets a little more cheap. So I do think we're going to see legit movement based on the drum beats we get out of these camps.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it too, where, certainly the public, I think the public's been dying for a reason to talk themselves into Najee Harris, just because he's had the volume and he has probably had one good year they remember where it was, well, again, largely volume based. I think though, those are the plays to me that, certainly the casuals start to talk themselves into more. But Jaylen Warren is just so analytically sound and so good. And, again, that was his first year in the NFL doing what he did. So like for me, I think that Warren's just one of the guys, Pete, that I think will always appeal to guys like us more. And then Najee will probably appeal to your average July, August drafter a little bit more.
Speaking of average drafters, so why Raz here going out and getting his guys? So to be fair, does get the Brock Purdy double stack with Kittle and Debo, which I certainly like. But taking Brock Purdy at 137 is aggressive. And here I said I didn't think Russell Wilson was going to ever have a chance of making it back to me. I will go ahead and take Russell Wilson to stack up with Dulcich and get that bring back on my my Chargers bet.
Your 2016 Pro Bowl QB roster with Aaron Rodgers, the real AR, and Russell Wilson.
That's right. I do like it. It does seem like in all of these drafts too, you were always drafting Anthony Richardson, and I'm always drafting the real AR.
Really is going to be, you have to be at least at market on Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, I guess you might be 6'8".
What am I? 8. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm just like right at even. And you know what? I haven't got to draft my boy Marvin Mims in a while, but man, at ADP, getting my double stack with Russ, this seems like the time to get back on the Marvin Mims train.
Yeah, hard to argue. Marvin Mims, I guess maybe not quite as frothy, though. Another guy that really could get frothed up by, if he's running with the first team, like that, all that Tim Patrick stuff lately probably goes by the wayside.
Yeah, it's the thing is, yeah, the Tim Patrick hype is real. I mean, what's the quote? Is it multiple people saying he's the best wide receiver they have on the team, which is so funny, considering they this staff, comes in and trades up to select Marvin Mims. We can argue whether Judy's overpriced or not, but he's probably the most talented wide receiver on the team, just as far as pedigree. And then we've seen some incredible stretches for Cortland Sutton where he just looked like a true alpha. And so the fact that Tim Patrick is like the buzz of being the best wide receiver on the team is pretty funny. That said, I do think there's a wide range of outcomes with stuff here. And as much as I like Marvin Mims, I don't think it's bad to be, taking flyers on Patrick. I have a decent amount of Patrick. Jen, when I did my draft with her the other day, she had me take Tim Patrick over Mims. I'm at 9.3%, which is kind of a lot for a late round guy. So my main overarching thing here is I'm just in on the Broncos bounce back. I in Sean Payton, I trust, and I'd prefer to play it through the cheaper options. Mims, Dulcich, Russ to an extent. So I don't know. I'm going to live and die by the Broncos this year a bit.
I'm in on Javonte just because I think that he would be, if there were sort of a health certainty or confidence, like to me, he's probably maybe not quite Brees range, but around behind that. So that's really the biggest Broncos bet I'm making. But I talk a lot about coaching and the importance of that. And I have to sort of say then that I do have kind of a Broncos blind spot because how bad they burned me last year. The move from Hackett to Sean Payton has to be worth something. Like it's got to be worth, maybe 100 points over the course of a year. And I think it's one of the things where if you got burned by him last year, you probably should go back to the till heavier just because that's such a big leap overall.
I think it's a huge swing because I think Nathaniel Hackett was taking wins away, like not even just like neutral. And where I think Sean Payton, and you can actually, someone had this stat, like looking, and I don't even know their methodology for determining it, but that Sean Payton was worth like a win and a half extra each year as a coach. So if you have the swing, let's even just say Nathaniel Hackett, you dock off or you add a 1.5 losses, and Sean Payton, you add on 1.5 win. That's a 3-game swing there going from a bad coach to a good coach. And that, I think that's a meaningful thing there. And I do think I want to be more careful with the Judy price. I was targeting it here. It got sniped. But when there is risk, I do want to really be playing it through the cheaper options. And there's tons of cheaper options with the Broncos where a lot of that risk is baked out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And I think certainly the Broncos, a team that lots of ways that can go. And certainly the youth, the draft capital invested in a guy like Mims, feels like one of those things that could get there a little bit early on. And shout out to the chat, by the way, if not giving the big plug here, but of course, Pete on his march to 15,000 subs on his channel, Splash Blade, similar amount away from 3,000 subs. So subscribe to both here, help the boys out as we try to move things in the right direction. I'm going to take Gainwell here. Gainwell has quietly risen to a 166 ADP, and I'm happy to buy that wherever he is because he's been undervalued for too long, Pete.
Yeah, I don't mind Gainwell there at all. I think what I'm going to do, I just keep smashing Jeff Wilson. And I'm basically trying to pump the brakes if I don't have like a logical reason to select him, but I think getting a fifth running back here, and also because I have the Zay Flowers, and I do like that little week 17 correlation there. So as the days pass and I continue to get more and more confidence that Dalvin Cook isn't going to Miami, man, I just continue to love Jeff Wilson. Like, do you think, say Dalvin Cook signed with the Jets today, do you think these Miami ADPs would inch up? Like, I guess I'm wondering how much of the Dalvin Cook specter is impacting these ADPs, or does the market just not like these guys as much as I do?
I think they like Jeff Wilson less than you do. And I like him similarly too. I think the guy who would jump the most would be A-Chain. He'd probably go up to the 100 range, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Just because people want to get the young guy, and then it'll be like, oh, he's safe now. But they all should go up like 10 spots, I would think, in terms of how, I think we're all approaching it.
Yeah. I don't like a lot here. Maybe what I'll do, I'm going to just build out my Minnesota bet a little bit. I've been wanting to get a little bit more Ty Chandler. Probably going to be done at running back here. So now I'll have the kind of Ty Chandler, Jordan Addison, and AJ Dillon game block there. But I didn't feel super strongly about any of the picks there.
And I'm taking Khalil Shakir just because I do have Josh Allen, and really no reason not to at this point, with nobody from New England coming up anytime soon for that correlation. Speaking of how much correlation week 17, too much correlation. I think Leone's found that 9-game stacked players is where you're probably maxed out on returns. But Pete, you don't have like a hard and fast rule, right, for what you're doing in terms of week 17 correlation?
No, because to me, I think that this question, and not to reframe it for Mr. P here, is like how much is onslaughting one team is too much, because I think it's impossible to have too many mini stacks or game stacks, right? Like if all of your pieces were in various games, like say you had it, this would be hard for it to work out this way, but let's just say you had 6 game stacks across your 18, which means you had 3 players from 6 different games. And some of those was a quarterback and a double stack. One of those was a quarterback, a stack, and a bring back. And then another one's was like the Green Bay, Minnesota one I just did, which was 2 running backs and a wide receiver. If you had 6 games that you're exposed to, that's good. That's great. I think more correlation is always better. The question is, if you have 6 guys from the Panthers, is that too much? Yeah, it's probably too much. And you want to then start to be price conscious and also realistic about the upside outcomes for that team.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And that's how, certainly you're making the bet on the team really more than anything. So like if you have 5 Cincinnati guys, that probably gets you a little bit further than 5, if we're going with the teams that I hate, 5 Tampa Bay guys might this year. So that's the kind of thing that I think I view it the same way as you do. But definitely some data out there that, overstacking too much in one game in particular can be a little bit dangerous. And is today the day that Pat drafted the winner last year? Yes, today is the day that Pat drafted the winner, and then also King Capital, right, Pete?
It is. Yeah, both of them. And then who was it? Someone was in my chat the other day saying, oh, it was Line of Scrimmage. I don't know if Line of Scrimmage is in here. He had the 3rd place team. He, Sacrilegious, who's in the Deposit Kingdom Discord, does a lot of good data research for best ball, pulled the receipts for him, and he drafted his 3rd place team on July 18th. So like truly a bizarre string of coincidences. And as Spags referenced before, Pat has a marathon stream that you can catch up on later after you get in all of your live splash play. And I will be over there today at 2 p.m. Drafting with him. There he is. There's Charlie.
Yeah, and I am baffled that Pierre Strong has been drafted. So that's
where's he at? Oh, you were looking for your New England.
Back? For somebody to do as a bring back there. Already have Devontae Parker's already been drafted as well. I do have 7 receivers, so I would like to get a 6th running back. God, I have so much Chase Brown. All right, another share Chase Brown. Come on down. I still think he's a valuable pick. I think Pete, the Joe Mixon restructuring, obviously good for Mixon being there, but also stabilizes a guy that's been not that great in terms of the advanced analytics. So I'm still in on Chase Brown. I don't know if you are.
I like them both. I like them both. I'm trying to wait till I get a little permission from the market. I've been getting more Travion just because Travion's completely free, but I do really think like in my heart of hearts, it's like 50-50, which one of those guys is going to be the 2 there. I'm going to take Dawson Knox just as a huge slider here to 203. Also, they do play the Chargers in week 16. So get a little week 16 game stack there. Now, what I'm kind of struggling with, Spags, I'm curious your thought here. So I'm at a 2-6-7-2. I think structurally, my team probably needs a 3rd tight end with Dulcich. and Knox, or I could get the double stack with Rodgers via Mecole Hardman and get to 8 wide receivers. Whereas I don't necessarily think this team needs an 8th wide receiver.
It does feel like you could use a third tight end, but yeah, that's the way I would go. But if you feel good enough about him, I don't mind taking a receiver.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's any kind of correlation things. I think I'm just going to take a tight end that I think has upside, and a guy I know you like as well, Michael Mayer, wanting to get some more of him. He feels like a guy who could rise a little bit with positive training camp stuff, maybe a little of the uncertainty with the Vegas situation. This was like a tough pick for me in that normally I am prioritizing some kind of correlation. I guess what you could have said, I probably should have done Hunter Henry because then he correlated with Knox and had the week 17 with Denver. So I could have kind of like round robin that correlation. I think if I could take that back, I would maybe do Henry. I was kind of weighing like the correlation versus like a player who I just think is completely underpriced and Michael Mayer, and ended up making the player selection.
Musgrave too would have made sense with your Addison.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
that is
love
the fun
Musgrave.
thing with tight ends. There's so many different things. I kind of prefer Musgrave with Jordan Love, I guess. Whereas with Mayer, there's not a quarterback that I ever am really selecting him with, anyways. But yeah, that would have been a fine option.
I do take my Jimmy G's, and Jimmy G, I think, will start to get drafted somewhat more reliably if he's just playing in training camp, because we are now at the point of his health, a recovery period that he should be getting back out there. I don't think people love Jimmy G enough to expect him to rise a bunch, but I do feel like Jimmy G, Pete, like Adams gets drafted, Jacobs gets drafted. I feel like Jimmy G should probably get drafted.
I just want to talk about this draft from YRAS. One of the most like it's one of those drafts where it's not someone just like randomly clicking buttons because they like understood stacking. They even have this big week 17 stack with Terry McLaurin coming back. But then the huge reach for Anthony Richardson, the huge reach for not, I guess, huge on Anthony Richardson, whatever, but a huge reach on Brock Purdy, then takes Devontae Parker 176, Fournette 185, and then Trey Lance to handcuff the Brock Purdy pick. Like if you're reaching, and I don't know, I'm sorry why I'm picking on YRAS here, but it just if you're reaching that much for Brock, like you got to be right that Brock's the guy, right?
Right.
Unless you're playing for a Trey Lance trade, which just seems thin. I don't know, just seems like some bizarre picks.
No, that's one of the things that I've observed a little bit. And we've had some really good people sending in drafts who joined the Splash Play channel as a member, and I'll review 10 teams a month for you if you join over there. But like basically, I've been seeing some of the unifying themes there. And one that I do see a little bit more that, I think is the one flaw amongst at least that self-selecting group of people that are sending me teams is that they are reaching a little bit too much for guys. And like it's you reach here, you reach there, and it's like you kind of diminish the overall portfolio. And if you're reaching for Purdy at 137, you're saying, hey, this guy is a lock to play and go. So why would you burn the 18th round on Trey Lance? And I think that's one of those logical gaps that even really good drafters sometimes miss.
Yeah, early, trust me, and I used to be a Lance guy, and I said on Best Ball Breakfast, the dream is dead. I do really think he's just a very bad pick right now. I think you need to get bailed out, especially when like we can go look in a sec. I was going to name this team, but like, did Desmond Ridder get taken there? Was Ryan Tannehill drafted? Like those guys are such better. Sam Howell is a better pick. Some of these guys that actually have a path to starting, and then you compound that with a handcuff there. I just don't think that is the best way to do it.
Yeah, so Feeling Moosey asking like not the worst pick 18 to corner the market. Yeah, if you're taking Purdy at like where he normally goes in the 170 range, but if you're taking him so early, that's like you're saying your confidence then is that he'll be going, and he's not only going, but he's a better pick than everybody else is saying right now. So it's a different bet than it would be like if you're taking Purdy in the 16th and then Lance in the 18th.
I agree. I still think it's a bad bet doing that, but I completely agree. Like once you take, like, I think you could argue if you knew you were getting 17 games of Brock Purdy at quarterback, this is like a fair price, like around Russ, around Matthew Stafford. So you are drafting him at like the tippity top of his upside with like certainty on his role. Like you have to then draft the rest of your team. Like that's what you're getting. And I think you could argue that this team needed some help at other positions here to kind of offset that. Like I think his running back room ended up being a little bit weak there, and I think he could have used another dart. But again, I apologize for picking on this drafter, but it just goes back to that thing we talk about a lot about drafting like you're right. And if you're going to reach for guys, you really have to draft like you're right.
Yep. No, I agree with you. So, Pete, give the plugs here because, of course, you're going to be joining Patch Stream in a little bit. I don't know what other shows you have coming up, but there's always great things going on here on the Pete Overzet Network, is what we're calling it.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the audio listeners need a
Oh, they
full
have to be
recap
serviced. Yes.
of the team. So here, I'll do mine first, and we'll go to Spags. So I have Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson at quarterback. Spags mercifully let Rodgers slide back to me. I did get a big value on Russell Wilson. Have 6 running backs: Bijan, Kenneth Walker, AJ Dillon, Brian Robinson, Jeff Wilson, Ty Chandler. Solid running back room. Wide receivers: Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen, Drake London, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, Marvin Mims. Holy rookie wide receivers. Tight ends: Greg Dulcich, Dawson Knox, Michael Mayer. Like I said, I kind of wish I would have gone Henry there instead of Mayer. Otherwise, I do like how this team came out. I think you could have also maybe made the case that I go just 5 running backs here and maybe tack on like Ritter to get an extra third stack there. But for the most part, I like this team. Spags, what did you do?
QB, I got a falling Josh Allen along with Kenny Pickett, who I reached to make sure I closed off that stack. Running back, Nick Chubb, Rashad White, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, and Chase Brown. I think pretty good running back capital. Maybe could have gone 5, but I did go 6. Receiver, Diggs, Ridley, Deontay Johnson, my favorite, Michael Pittman, Alan Lazard, DJ Chark, Khalil Shakir, and Terrence Marshall there for the Jacksonville correlation. And a tight end, Dallas Goedert, and Dalton Kincaid. This is an interesting team for me, Pete, because I think I made some choices, went a little bit heavier at receiver, and then did get some early running back capital in too. This is not my usual team, but it's close to it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. I didn't have. You did get, yeah, you got your Pitt and your Seattle bring back with Charbonnet, which is nice. What did it? You just got boxed out on your New England bring back.
Yeah, I got boxed out of New England, got boxed out of the AR portion of things with Pittman, and then didn't go chasing that because I just have enough Indianapolis, Vegas for week 17. But I got players I like Goddard and Kincaid, I think is a potent 2 tight end duo for how I view things.
Yeah, and my whole thing with Kincaid is I think he's overpriced. I don't really ever select him, but if I do select him, it would be with Josh Allen. I think that is really the time where that makes sense. But even then, like I'm partial because I've been taking a decent amount of Knox, and I think you could take both of those guys together, honestly, on the same team. But Dawson Knox going at pick 203 Spags, even you have to admit that's kind of ridiculous.
I was thinking about it because he had fallen so much that I was like, does it make sense to take both Buffalo tight ends, especially if I didn't take another receiver besides Diggs? And I think I could have gone that way, but I'm glad, I helped you get AR, helped you get Knox, all the players that are going to really decide this season for both of us.
Yeah, my only other I didn't have so I have my big Russell Wilson Denver double stack with 2 bringbacks. The Rodgers just ended up being a skinny stack. I was kind of hoping that Conklin was going to make it all the way back because Conklin has been falling yesterday. What did I get Conklin at? Pick 205. So I was like, oh, maybe that'll happen again and I'll complete that double stack. That would have been nice. And I have no Cleveland bring back there, but I'm just playing it as a skinny with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, which seems fine because I built out so many of those other game stacks without the quarterback.
Yeah, and the Wilson bet is the big one anyway. So, like, if he gets there, he's probably taking AR with him anyway.
Yeah. The other player that I'm normally getting on a build like this, I have 2 Atlanta guys. Normally I'm taking like 1 Bears running back, in a draft. But Deontay Foreman didn't fall to me there. So didn't get to complete that mini, but otherwise 2 fun team Spags. And yeah, this is draft number 90 for me. As always, this stream is eligible for the comment giveaway. Who was in the chat earlier? Someone was telling me that they are going to help me out with scraping all of these comments, which is greatly appreciated here. So I will be doing that drawing when I hit 15K subs. We continue to add a decent amount. We're getting close to only being 600 away. Maybe by the end of the day, we'll be there. So after the show is over, you can leave a comment and that'll get you entered into the giveaway for $1,500, 3 winners, $500 each. And then Spags and I are going to head over to Splash Play right now to draft another team. And that video will also be eligible for the giveaway. So anywhere I am drafting one of my Best Ball Mania bullets is eligible.
Yeah, I am champing at the bit to draft a 0RB team, and hopefully we can do that on that stream. But yes, this is a very generous giveaway by Pete, so make sure you're getting in here, of course, because you're going to hit those subs faster than people realize, Pete. And if they don't get those comments in, then they're boned. They don't get their entries in.
Yeah, because let me tell you, the second I hit 15K, I'm going to get in touch with my data scrapers and say, let's scrape it. Contest closed. Contest closed. So if you're wanting to get in there, go ahead. I do have the playlist on my channel, all 150 stream drafts will be contained within that playlist. So I've made it easy for you.
All right, so there you go. So make sure to follow Pete at Peter Overzet to track the rest of his journey, of course. And Pete, you're going up on Patch Stream. You said at 2 p.m.
Yeah, 2 p.m. Over there. I'll be drafting with Leone and Gretsch alongside Pat.
There we go. So all the great minds there on Patch Stream, but go hang out with us. One more draft coming up on the Splash Play channel as we march to 3,000 subs on there. We appreciate each and every one of you hanging out with us. We'll see you guys over on that channel in a moment.